Well, good afternoon. I'm all of 5 feet, and so I'm told never to stand behind podiums, but I'm going to today because I have a few notes that I want to make sure and take a look at throughout my presentation. First of all, thank you, Lloyd, and congratulations on your impending retirement, and congratulations, Jason. This is exciting. Thank you to the board and all of the members for inviting us here today. Bill and I do a lot of work together on a couple of different levels, and on top of that, I think Bill is a really great guy, and I'm excited for you to hear from him. So I won't rush, but I want to get on to the other speakers as well. So again, thank all of you for being here today in an effort to move Wyoming forward. So as I prepared for today, notably, I think Lloyd tried something a little bit different in inviting education to the table, to the infrastructure table, knowing that we might lend a unique perspective to the conversation. And I really thought a lot about the word infrastructure and what does it mean. To give you a little bit by way of my background, I'm a teacher by trade. I'm a Campbell County graduate. Hi, Noreen. And so definitely no stranger to the coal industry and to this city of Gillette, setting up, in my opinion, what is sort of the gold standard in infrastructure with respect to natural resources, energy, and that more traditional infrastructure. But I think there's a different kind of infrastructure too that's often overlooked, or at least a different element to the word infrastructure, and that's human infrastructure, and that's what I want to talk a little bit about today. But I think you're going to see how the two really can be married together. So. In the education world, I think of all and infrastructure. I think of all of the work that Bill Panos and the School Facilities Commission, which I'm honored to sit on as a member, are doing. And I think about the state's unified network that's bringing redundancy and huge amounts of gigs to our schools and to our communities across the state. And I also think of, again, that traditional infrastructure, water, sewer, and roads. And then again is that element of human infrastructure, and just that we have this infrastructure of kids in Wyoming who are the future employees and employers and state leaders across our state, and that Wyoming really needs to continue to provide a workforce that necessitates these infrastructure needs, these human infrastructure needs that lead to the more traditional infrastructure needs. So when I think about sort of the traditional and human infrastructure overlap, there are two key areas that I want to talk about today, and one is career and technical education and STEM, or if you're living under a rock, I'll let you know that means science, technology, engineering, and math. These days, a lot of folks are putting additional initials into that acronym and including things like arts and agriculture, but for all intents and purposes, it's the future of Wyoming, and it's the future of our nation in many ways. And the second key area that I want to talk about is just the education and culture around energy and specifically infrastructure in our schools, and what are our graduates doing with that knowledge now? What are they getting, and what do they need to know and have when they graduate from Wyoming high schools? So if you have spoken to me either during my campaign for State Superintendent of Public Instruction or for more than probably 5 minutes since I've been in office, you've heard me talk about career and technical education. It's my stump everywhere I go, and if I'll talk about it as long as you'll let me. My love for career and technical education comes from my true love for the state of Wyoming, and having been here for nearly 45 years, my entire life now, I see that a lot of my friends and a lot of my students, when I was a teacher, are leaving the state. And I think that that's so unfortunate. I've loved every minute, every day that I've lived in Wyoming, and I've never wanted to live anywhere else. And I'm lucky enough to have become prosperous as a Wyomingite and raise my children here. And I want them to stay in Wyoming too, but they won't if they don't realize that there are opportunities for them here. And so, I also know that that we have a workforce where in 2025, it's estimated that nearly half of our workforce in the nation will not be incumbent on having employees with a 4-year degree. And that's a big shift. Education is still absolutely the passport to the American dream, and I don't want to discount that. But for a long time, our nation has been very focused on a college education. Everyone needs a 4-year degree, college readiness. And hopefully now you're starting to hear that conversation shift to career and college readiness. In Wyoming, when you talk to me, you're going to hear me talk about career, college, and military readiness. Those are the aspects that I think will keep our great kids here and thriving and prospering in Wyoming and keep Wyoming strong for generations to come. So the way that we do that is by really keying in with your industry, with higher education, with communities, and with school districts, and all working together to make that happen, and by really dispelling those myths around career and technical education. Number one, that you're either a career tech ed kid or a college track kid, because that doesn't need to be the case. Or number two, that you can't make a living if you don't have a 4-year degree. Those are cultural shifts, and I'm doing my darndest to change that and to dispel those myths. And I also see that we have a lot of communities across our state who are doing a great job of promoting career and technical education, promoting natural resources, promoting industry related to infrastructure and energy, and that's really exciting to see. Yesterday, I had an opportunity to talk to Wyoming Association of Municipalities in the afternoon and career tech ed teachers at night. And I was at South High School yesterday. And South High School, there's a really special class. That's one example of many. But kids can take a geometry course that is in the field construction. So they're fulfilling their geometry requirement by building buildings, building sheds, building art studios, building homes. And I think we're going to see more and more of that. That's one example of some really great pockets of career and technical education in the high school that we have, and we have many, many more in higher education, especially in our community colleges, that are working very closely with industry and very closely with K-12 education to really bring career and technical education to life. So last year, the construction industry was second among Wyoming industries hiring workers. And we know that a lot of those workers are not from Wyoming, and we want to see more of those workers from Wyoming because they're starting at a wage of $17 to $30 an hour. And frankly, for an 18 to 25-year-old, even higher than that. That's a really livable wage, even with a family. But a lot of people don't recognize that. So again, so much is beginning to take shape across our state with respect to career and technical education. We want to keep our Wyoming kids here, and I know the governor is committed to that, as well as a number of state agencies. Workforce Services has a new program that they're rolling out called Wyoming Grown, where they're attracting kids back to the state, and I think it's really exciting work. Now is the time to really push this ball forward because there is so much collaboration in state government and in communities across our state. The governor's office, educators, me, community colleges, the university, the Department of Workforce Services, all of you, industry, and so many others are very, very interested in really addressing the gaps in not only our workforce, but in our high school graduates and in our workforce training programs. So lately, and I understand the governor's coming, so I don't want to steal his thunder, and he may be talking about this, so I'm going to give a quick overview. But the governor convened recently a career in technical education and STEM work group or group to really begin working on professional development opportunities for teachers, closer partnerships with industry, and more sort of infiltration of career and technical education in our communities across the state. And at the Department of Education, we're really excited to be a part of that work and be a co-leader by being sort of that conduit or that connector with our school districts, who then hopefully will connect with our communities to make that happen. We are also involved in a number of student organizations related to career and technical education that really seeks to provide more opportunities for kids and really makes career and technical education fields more for lack of a better word, more sexy to the high school kid, and not a proposition of, gee, if I can't make it in college, maybe I can make it in a career and technical education field. And we just really need to dispel that, and our kids need to understand that career and technical education isn't just about having a job, but it's really about having a prosperous career and strengthening Wyoming and having a future in our state for generations to come. So as state superintendent, you will see me focus on a couple of things. In addition to talking about the STEM and career and technical education and shining a spotlight on it, and any opportunity that I have, I will continue to work with groups like the Infrastructure Authority and directly partner with industry and others to make sure that you understand how vital it is that as you look and realize that you can make a small investment in high school kids now to secure a Wyoming workforce in the future, that door is open to you. I hear so often that industry has a hard time getting into schools. And then I hear from schools that they have a really hard time partnering with industry, sometimes even in their own backyard. And so I will work to really align those two, or align that partnership between school districts and industry so that it's easier for you to get into schools and easier for schools to reach out to you. You'll also see me work with the governor's office, other state agencies, and our legislature on some really great policy around career and technical education. Right now, we have some hang-ups with the Hathaway Scholarship and the Success Curriculum, where students who take too many career and tech ed courses are perhaps or perceived as being penalized in the Hathaway Scholarship program. And so we need to, first of all, do some educating around that, and then maybe build some additional policy that incentivizes those kids that go down a workforce or a community college route to gain employment through training that way. And the third thing that you'll see me talk a lot about and act upon is really thinking about the courses that we offer in high school and making sure that they scale up to either skills that are relevant and valued in industry, or scale up to relevant certifications and that they are employable perhaps right out of high school, or that they scale up to additional coursework at the community college or university level. And if they don't scale up to something that's meaningful for you, then frankly, we should not be teaching it in high school. And that's a tough pill to swallow. And I gave the career and tech ed teachers sort of a call to action last night and said, I challenge you to be open-minded. I was looking at the career and tech ed course listings in our state, and we have 41 different syllabi offered for web design, basic web design. And while I think web design is really important because it gives some basic skills, what we don't know, especially with 41 different syllabi related to that course, is if it's meaningful to you. And if it's not, then we either need to make it meaningful or we need to not teach it. And so you will hear me talking a lot about phasing out courses that are not of value to industry and really scaling up those courses that are of value. So the last thing that I want to talk about today is just education in the realm and culture around energy and infrastructure. And it's just a general conversation, and I'm going to go a little bit off script here and give you a minute by minute, up to date, I guess, account of what's happening with our science standards right now in Wyoming. If you hadn't noticed, there's been a little bit of controversy around our science standards in the last couple of years, and it's been a really interesting conversation. We were set, for all intents and purposes in Wyoming, to adopt what are called the Next Generation Science Standards. And those are a set of standards that are shared or can be shared across states, and really sort of a general, rigorous, broad spectrum set of standards for science. Again, for all intents and purposes, Wyoming was set to adopt those, and our legislature stepped in and just kind of hit the pause button on that and said, let's slow down for a couple of reasons. Number one, people feel like they weren't heard in that process. Number two, is this really what we want our kids to know and be able to articulate in Wyoming with respect to science? So, of course, I wasn't state superintendent at that point and really didn't have much of a say or influence throughout the campaign, and even now, about what happened in the past. But I think in hindsight, that was a really good thing, because it did cause us to hit the pause button. And in the meantime, gave us all an opportunity and to really talk about what we want in science standards. So here's my vision for science standards in Wyoming. I'm a Wyoming girl. I'm a Gillette girl. I learned about agriculture because I branded on the weekends with my mom and dad, and that was about the extent of it. I had friends who were in FFA, and I kind of learned by proxy. And I learned about the coal industry, first of all, because it was kind of in my face, and second of all, because after high school, I visited a coal mine. It was never part of my curriculum, never part of my standards, and frankly, I think that's a little bit of a shame. If we're trying to grow Wyoming students who want to stay in Wyoming industry and be part of our future, then they really need to know, understand, and be able to articulate our science right here in Wyoming. And I would argue with anyone that we live in one of the most science-rich states in the nation. So let's get the best of the best science standards that allow us to be competitive nationally and internationally, but let's not ever neglect the science that we have right here in Wyoming that will help our state in the future and have our Wyoming graduates leave high school being great consumers, not only of science on a national and international stage, but on a state stage as well. And do they understand Wyoming science? Do they understand natural resources, our unique geology, our agricultural industry, etc.? So that's my hope and my goal for Wyoming science standards and the work that we're undertaking. Right now, the Wyoming Department of Education, my chief policy officer and his team are traversing the states, taking input from communities on what they want to see in Wyoming science standards before the work even begins. So I rarely, because I'm a teacher at heart, I taught English for 10 years, end the class without giving an assignment. So here's your call to action. As industry partners, please be involved in these science standards. Give your input. Right now, you can give it in written form on the Wyoming Department of Education website, and you'll have opportunities to do so throughout the entire standards process. But we need to know what our graduates need to understand about your world, about your industries, so that you have a workforce in the future and so that we have a stronger Wyoming. So, I can't underscore enough how much I appreciate Lloyd bringing Bill and I, and he's going to talk about something more exciting than just education. He's talking about construction, and But I just can't leave without underscoring, again, my thanks to Lloyd for inviting us here and giving me this opportunity to just impart to you how important it is that you're involved as an industry with education, because we need you at the table, and we need you giving us information about what our students need to know and be able to articulate about your world. So thank you for all that you do for our state and for listening to me today. I spent 10 years in Wyoming classrooms teaching. I've spent about that long now working on policy and in state government, and I couldn't be more proud to serve the state of Wyoming as your state superintendent. And I want you to know that I have an open door. Of course, I have the opportunity to sit on SLIB and land commissioners and all of those boards, and I know that we'll intersect in that way as well. And again, we already have with many of you. And my door is always open to talk about those issues, whether it's education, whether it's energy, or some other topic. Please know that my door is always open, and thank you again.
Great job, Jillian. So we're going to have take some questions from the board.
Great.
Just maybe one comment besides thank you for being here. And these are two things that are really more for your awareness, just to make sure they're on your radar screen. One is just recently we commissioned a study with the University of Wyoming showing the impact of 111D, the Clean Power Plan on Wyoming, which shows a 40% decline in state revenues with the impact of that plan. So that's probably that's a pretty significant impact on our education and even our education funding. So that's out there, something to be aware of as you kind of continue to work the issues and have awareness. On the brighter side of things, one of the things the Infrastructure Authority is working on is helping to stand up the Integrated Test Center in Gillette. And that project will provide some facilities to test carbon capture technologies and hopefully kind of further capture and enhance oil recovery. A component of that is hopefully hosting an X Prize competition, which if we are able to do that, that's going to bring some significant education opportunities and maybe a whole level of opportunity from the perspective of innovation and technology that may be some things for your group to be aware of and weigh in on and leverage the value and the relationship with X Prize to further your goals on technology and science, engineering, and math stuff. So just a couple of things for you, no questions.
Okay, well, I would like to just respond, if I might. First of all, thank you so much. And, I'm often accused of being overly optimistic, but I'm also a realist, and I know what's coming down the road with respect to funding. Right now, our legislature is working on recalibration of funding. Of course, you're going to be talking with Bill Panos next, and school construction is going to be hit hard. And, again, I have to point to the people in this room who have set the gold standard for infrastructure in so many ways, and that's school buildings notwithstanding. We have an amazing infrastructure of school buildings across our state, and not that we're ever going to be ready for the decline that we're going to be feeling, but at the same time, we do have some infrastructure built in the education system as well as in school facilities to be able to withstand that a little bit easier. But you're right, it is not always going to be greener pastures like we felt, but I don't think that will limit our ability or capacity to continue to improve our education system, and also to continue to really think innovatively and make sure that we are turning out the very best graduates in Wyoming. And with respect to your second comment, it's really exciting, and I wish I had another hour to start talking about all of the great STEM activities and and efforts that are afoot in the state. Suffice to say that if there is ever a way in your communities that I can help lend a spotlight or help sort of bring that connection to K-12 or to education in general, please, please, please contact me. That's what I love to do. I want to champion education. I want our state to realize that education doesn't happen in a vacuum. It doesn't solely happen in a classroom, a beautiful classroom, thanks to Bill Panos, but a classroom, that we have so many partners and stakeholders in education. And if I can help lend that spotlight to what you're doing, I will by all means be able to do that for you. Any other questions or comments?
Other questions from the board, audience? Well, Jillian, thanks again so much for coming, and we know that you're about to hit the road, so safe travels and come back soon.
Thank you, Lloyd, and congratulations again.